Namaskar and welcome to Sunset Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues. Today we're going to talk about the issue of population and changing population dynamics across the globe. China has recorded its first population decline in several decades. According to the data published by the National Bureau of Statistics of China, the population of mainland China was 1.411 billion people at the end of 2022, which is a decrease of approximately 850,000 over the previous year. Last year, in November, when the world's population reached 8 billion, the United Nations projection suggested that the global population could grow to around 8.5 billion in 2030, 9.7 billion by 2050, and 10.4 billion by 2100. According to UN report, sustained high fertility and rapid population growth present challenges to the achievement of sustainable development. In 2022, world's two most populous regions were in Asia, and with more than 1.4 billion each, China and India accounted for most of the population in these two regions. Now, India entered the demographic dividend opportunity window in 2005-2006, and this window will remain till 2055 and 2056. In December last year, the central government, in a reply to a question in Lok Sabha, had said that efforts have been successful in reining in the growth of population in the country. So today we'll try and understand various dynamics of the population growth, and then these changing dynamics, what kind of impact do they have on not only India, our neighbor China, but globally as well. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Ms. Poonam Mutreja is joining us. She's Executive Director of Population Foundation of India. We also have with us Dr. S.K. Singh, Professor and Head of the Department of Research and Data Analytics at IIPS, and Dr. Yamini Agarwal, Professor at the Indian Institute of Finance, is also with us. Welcome, all of you, to Sunset Television. I'll begin with you, Mutreja ji, and let's first start by understanding what is changing actually when we're talking about, population figures and these changing dynamics. Of course, the growth rate of population will change in any particular period of time in a given space. But these kind of numbers, figures, which we are now trying to understand, how big is the change and how significant is this change?
So we knew for the last several years that India is ultimately going to overtake the population of China. Second, we also knew that India's population will grow up to 1948, where our population stabilization will happen, but we have started the process of stabilization. So one, I'd like to say the dynamic is that population is stabilizing across the world, not just in India, and we don't have to panic and have conversations and distract our attention about the two-child norm. We also know that India has a large young population, which is at a reproductive age. So India's population will increase for the next several years because of the population momentum. Young people, even if they have one child, it'll increase the population. And so we have to recognize that 1/3 of India's population is young. So India has, as you said, this enormous opportunity where the window of getting for us to benefit from a population, young population is there, where demographic dividend can be realized. So it's time for us to think about investing in young people, education, skills, access to family planning. And we also have to recognize that India is going through a curve which the world has gone through, where populations increase and then come down, and then reach minus growth rates in many countries like China, which is worried and is giving incentives to its people to increase the population. The rest of the world is probably going to rely, and maybe even China one day, from India, young, skilled, or even older skilled people. We are going to be suppliers of skilled professionals and labor to the rest of the world. And so there will be a imbalance that will be balanced.
Okay.
Finally, India has done very well economically in spite of rest of the world continuing to have, especially post-COVID, a decline in the economic growth. And India's tip to really do well, but provided we invest in our people, human beings should be seen as a resource, and the world has to stop panicking. Finally, last point that I want to make is, as India becomes the most populous country, there will be criticism. There will be pitting climate change against the large population. And I think it's very important for the world and us to understand that India is doing well on the climate change and footprint. We are not contributing the way a lot of developed countries have contributed and are going to continue to contribute to climate change. India has to be prepared in understanding and saying, and not be browbeaten by the rest of the world.
Okay, fair enough.
I'll
You've
stop there.
summarized major issues involved out there. Let me bring in Professor S.K. Singh here as well. Professor Singh, in terms of analyzing these growth patterns and trying to understand as to what is changing, not only from an Indian perspective, but from a global perspective, how would you look at the changes which are happening, in various parts of the globe? But when we talk about Asia, there are two most populous countries, that is China and India, one taking over the other when we're looking at the population figures, but it's stabilizing at, as Ms. Mutreja pointed out. Whereas in other parts of the globe also, there are countries which are struggling to, maintain that population growth. And then there are other smaller countries where perhaps the population explosion is a cause of concern for them.
Yeah, you are right, Mr. Dahiya. There is a tremendous heterogeneity globally in population dynamics. Some of the European countries, American countries, even Australia, New Zealand are facing different kind of challenges. And we, two Asian giants, India and China, are facing different kind of huge population. That is why whatever are the recent changes in India and China, that is going to affect the globe. Of course, slight dynamics of African countries will be different. That is why if you talk about the situation in India, as panelist Poonamji has already mentioned, that India is in a quite comfortable situation. During last 1 decade, not only population control program, but various flagship programs has made paradigm change in quality of life of the people. Population control program has been quite effective. Our TFR has gone below 2. That is why only because of population momentum, because of young population, we will be continuing to grow around 2048 or 2049. But subsequently, we will decline. She has already mentioned about the key features of our population dynamics. I would like to, BIG, concentrate on the key challenges.
Okay.
With the current situation, in one hand, we are having demographic dividend. On the other hand, we are also growing fast, our older population. With increasing population aging, increasing burden of non-communicable disease in our country, the universal health coverage is going to be a remote challenge for our country.
Okay.
That is why we will have to adopt some innovative strategies by classifying secondary and tertiary healthcare services sponsored by government, but entire vast network of primary healthcare, which is serving rural people, public-private partnership is becoming most essential element along with Prime Minister Jan Arogya Yojana, Ayushman Bharat. Otherwise, this challenge will be very difficult. She has also mentioned that India's economic growth is quite satisfactory. Entire world is looking towards India, how India's GDP is increasing. It's a fact that in one hand, we are reaching towards 5 trillion economy. But there is another challenge here, increasing disparity, high inequality. Few days back, some of the media houses have highlighted, that's a fact also, that 50% of wealth is lying in only few, less than 10% of only billionaires in our country. That economic disparity is going to create a huge challenge, especially when there is increasing unemployment. female labor force participation is declining. Gender differences in employment, declining, increasing unemployment rate are the real challenge.
Okay.
Third
Okay.
important problem which I am discussing with this population is unplanned urbanization and environmental degradation. We are talking about climate change in broader aspects, but if you look at the root cause of that, unplanned urbanization and environmental degradation is going to be another key challenge before the country, which we will have to address in near future. Otherwise, population dynamics, population growth, that is not going to be. We all are aware that we are going to stabilize somewhere between 2055 to 2060.
Okay.
Anytime during that period. Because projections are projection. Look at China.
Indeed, indeed.
Basically,
We'll come to that, Dr. Singh. We'll come to that. But since you mentioned, lot of challenges when we're talking about India here, let me also bring in Dr. Yamini Agarwal. She's been patiently listening to the views both of you had. And since you spoke about few parts of that, Dr. Agarwal, United Nations also in its report says that the rapid growth of population also leads to the challenges of sustainable development. Now, when we come back to Indian story, India has strong economic fundamentals. It is a vibrant growing economy, and then on top of that we have this demographic dividend as well, which will add further impetus and further value also. But given the fact that there are various challenges, which Dr. Singh also pointed out, how do you analyze this combination, which will have to be balanced properly?
Well, you've raised a very important point, because what happens is whatever amount of growth that you do does get affected by the population size that you have. And if the population size continues to grow, the growth does not reflect in the overall development of the economy. Let's say, for example, when we talk about per capita income, we should grow at the rate at which the GDP is growing, but it doesn't reflect because the population size is continuously growing. Again, another important aspect is because the economy is growing fast, it should also result in, a good distribution of incomes among people. But because a certain set of people, we observe that they get into the vicious circle of poverty because they raise too many kids at the same time. They're unable to provide them with the right kind of education, right kind of health services, or the right kind of support for them to actually rise in the ladder of economic growth or economic development. Another important aspect is what is observed is that over the years, with the help of education, with the help of population control measures, with the two-child policy, or with other things, even the participation of women increasing in terms of the overall labor force, there has been a change in the attitudes of people, which is reflected in the low fertility rates or in the lower number of children that people are having, especially in the urban area where they choose to have one child vis-a-vis two children also. But what has happened is the people who are not within the sphere of economic prosperity do not receive, the educational benefits, do not receive other benefits. They continue to have more and more children, which put more pressure on their resources as well as on the resources of the country. For a sustainable growth, it is necessary that everybody's development is there and it is inclusive in nature. Despite providing all welfare schemes, whether it is in terms of food, whether it is in terms of other things, these particular welfare schemes, somehow still are not able to achieve their objective because of the large base of population at that point of time. Another important aspect for sustainability is that when provisioning is made of a certain amount of services, whether it's education, it is healthcare, or it's any other resource that is there in the market, that particular resource crunch is felt because of the continuous growing population.
Okay.
And that crunch causes more and more problems, specifically because there is more income inequalities, which makes resources more scarce for the poorer population vis-a-vis the the richer population.
Okay.
And the exploitation of environmental resources or other resources which are maybe not health-wise better, or may not be or are of a substandard technology, are used by people, which make it more unsustainable. Let's say,
Okay.
for example, when we talk about the air pollution level, when winters are there, people are not able to find venues to get themselves some heat, so they burn wood. So that causes more air pollution. Similarly, there are many other issues that arise, like getting into non-environment friendly activities. The similar set, because they feel that is less expensive, they
Indeed.
make things
So,
more unsustainable.
so these are smaller issues. They might look smaller at a particular level, but then they do gradually, add on to become bigger, larger challenges. Is what Dr. Agarwal is pointing out. Ms. Mutreja, I'd like to bring you in here. The challenges part, which you also earlier referred to, that yes, there are, we are on the path to tackle those challenges. But when we are talking about focus areas, as Dr. Singh said, health, education, Dr. Agarwal is also pointing out, perhaps, looking at, the quality of life as well, increasing the quality of life. Which areas you believe in the years to come we should focus on so that we can make good use of the demographic dividend which we have and tackle the challenges or the negative aspects of these changing population dynamics in a better way?
So the first, I'd like to say that we must invest in skilling our young people for their economic growth and the country's economic growth. Second, I'd like to say that India has to invest more in family planning. We have made some progress, a fair amount of progress, especially reaching out to the last mile. We have invested a very good program that the government of India came out with 6 years ago called the Mission Parivar Vikas, where they're targeting the high fertility districts. And that has brought some good results that needs to be scaled up. It needs to be strengthened. Second, we need, Dr. Mukherjee has said that, Agarwal had said that there are Indian poor families end up having more children. It's very true. The more educated you are, the fewer children you'll have. The more income you have, the fewer children you will have. And there is an unmet need we must understand for family planning in India, which is in government data. It is today 10%, but in states like UP, it's still 13%. So we need to invest in meeting the unmet need. We need to invest in women's empowerment, whereby women have the decision-making ability, capability, freedom to make, to use contraceptives. And we need, for a young population, India needs to invest not just money, but it needs to bring in more methods for family planning, which are temporary, which are long-lasting, temporary, but not, the young people are not going to get sterilized. We must also recognize that young people do have needs for contraception and they also need sex education. But final one, I would say India must continue to be on the path of performing well on the climate change index, which we are doing well on, and international climate politics. India earns a high actually rating in the GHG emissions also, and
Indeed.
energy, renewable energy. The country is on track to meet the 2030 emission targets. And I think if India could be a great example for the rest of the world to invest more in compatible and a well below the rest of the world emission pattern.
Indeed.
And it is believed that a large growing population might be is a challenge to the environment, but the exploitation of resources, what we saw in Uttarakhand, for instance, recently, India must come down very heavily on preventing climate disasters because it impacts the poor, the middle class, the lower middle class the most. And finally, I'd like to say, I finally would like to say that we must recognize that we have a young population which we have to not only invest in their skilling, mental well-being, education, everything. We have to have a plan for our young people.
Indeed, we have to have a plan, and India being the largest democracy and soon, the most populous country as well, will have to set standards, global standards to be met by others. Now, this was all about India, but let's quickly, one question each from Professor Singh and Dr. Agarwal as well. On the global aspect, Professor Singh, when I interrupted you earlier, you were about to give us a view on China, which has been so far the most populous country. They're now seeing a downtrend as well. Similarly, the changing trends, the changing dynamics world over in population standards and population metrics, how do you see that changing things globally for other countries, other economies as well?
If you look at the last year 2020 estimates of United Nations, India will cross China somewhere 28, 29. But in their last year estimates, United Nations has revised it, and now he estimates that they should cross us. India should cross China, and India will become number one sometimes in July.
Okay.
In last few weeks, many media houses, I am not saying about their source of information, are claiming that India has crossed China. What has happened in China? India is progressing steadily. As Dr. Poonam Mutreja has already pointed out about success of Indian family planning program. I have already mentioned you, our TFR has gone below replacement level, and it's a question of only population momentum. After that, we will go down. And then I move toward challenges. Okay. China, what has happened? If China has drastically reduced during last 2 to 3 years, if you look at their TFR, till late 80s, their TFR was 2.6. or 2.7. In late 90s, their TFR was 1.6, 1.7. That continued even up to first decade of the current century.
Okay.
But what has happened, suddenly in 2022, it came down to 1.3 TFR. In 2021, it came down to 1.15. We suspect that is primarily because of COVID-related restrictions.
Okay.
Birth has gone so down. Your screen was also showing some 850,000 figure. India, fortunately, has not passed through that. And that is why whatever has happened in China, that can be treated as a temporary phenomena.
Okay.
That is
okay. That's fairly point taken, Dr. Singh. We're running very short of time, so I'll interrupt you there, and I'll quickly take one final response from Dr. Agarwal there also on the global aspect, and then the Chinese angle also, as Professor Singh is pointing out. Of course, we can't overlook that China is our immediate neighbor, and in terms of population, in terms of economic growth, in terms of demographic dividend, China was a few years ago where we would be in next few years.
Well, I think the Chinese with their policy are actually facing a reverse pyramid where they have the older population, which is bigger, and the younger population, which is smaller, which is making it a difficult sustainability issue. But what India adopted as a policy of 2 child, 1 family, and a family planning was a much better approach. Also, what the India has been doing is it has been trying to provide for a certain set of education and empowerment to women by bringing their labor force participation at a higher rate. One important aspect is the marriage bill, which the government is planning to bring about, where the age of the girl for the marriage is being raised for 21, which automatically brings a higher, a higher level of understanding for a girl before she enters into a matrimonial alliance and begins the cycle of her reproduction.
Okay.
Another important aspect is that there has been a continuous education among the youth and among the people with respect to contraceptives and other aspects, which have definitely benefited people.
Okay.
Education policy also has been strong and stringent enough to bring about the necessary awareness in this regard.
Okay.
So I believe the directive role which the government has been playing is very essential in terms of taking control of the population.
Okay.
Besides giving it a venue for productive resources like skill development, or jobs or other things.
Okay, there it is. Thank you so much, Dr. Yamini Agarwal, Ms. Mutreja, and Dr. Singh as well for sharing your valuable time and inputs with us and our viewers, as well as our experts were pointing out very clearly. There are various aspects to this changing population dynamics, not only vis-a-vis India, but globally as well. But when we come down to Indian dynamics, then there are various aspects which will have to be looked into. It does pose a lot of challenges. It do have, its benefits in terms of demographic dividend, which will continue to be with us till 2055. But then those challenges also will have to be tackled on the way by focusing more on health, education, skilling our population, and looking at various other aspects also. We'll keep a close watch on all the developments here and come back again with a different topic. Till then, keep watching Sunset Television. Thank you.